Live in the Element Wealth Studios on a Monday morning. And Dave Hughes in the chair, and joining me now, both on the air and on SuperTalk TV, the president of Delta State University, and doing some good things, Dr. Daniel Ellis. Dr. Ellis, how you doing this morning?
It's great to be here, Dan Ennis. I'm so glad to join you.
Well, I want to tell you something. I think that you got the messaging exactly right, because you're talking about the economics of Delta State University and an education, and you made it crystal clear right up front. Your goal is not to increase tuition, right?
Yes, sir. We're proud to say that we're the only Mississippi public university to hold the line on tuition this year.
And that is kind of rare because especially with the economy the way it is, you want to keep it as accessible and affordable as possible for as many students as possible. And that's kind of it's almost in today's economy, just holding the price steady is almost like having a coupon, really, to be honest.
Well, certainly from our point of view, we're Delta State University, and the part of the state that we particularly serve, although we have students from all over the state of Mississippi and all over the country, our particular region that we have a special duty to is a region that needs affordable higher education. And so part of getting our budget in a place that's sustainable is understanding that we cannot price ourselves out of the market and put that burden on our students.
Well, you do bring up the probably the more difficult part of this conversation, because not raising tuition, that's fantastic. But how do you get things under control financially? How are you going to manage getting the budget under control without raising tuition?
Well, we did have to announce a round of cuts early last week, and that certainly was painful for me as an academic. I would much rather start new programs and talk about new curriculum than talk about shuttering some programs that have very few students. But in the world we operate in, we have the same pressures that businesses do. I have payroll, I have overhead, I have revenue, I have expenses. And what I was really trying to do is consolidate our payroll, which is mostly faculty, around those programs that were really viable in terms of generating graduates. And that meant some painful decisions regarding those programs that have been struggling. And unfortunately, some of these struggling programs had been struggling for a very long time. And so the intervention that I took was probably traumatic, because rather than gradually reviewing its programs over the course of a decade, I think the institution had sort of let status quo dominate the thinking. And as a new president, I just couldn't sign up for status quo.
Well, there is a certain allure to, well, we've always done it this way, and why would we stop now? There's a certain amount of comfort in keeping those programs and those things around, even if, when you look at it on paper, it might not be giving back what you're putting into it. But it is still painful at the same time, because as an educator, I'm sure, you want to offer as many different options as possible to the student body, right?
Right. And, we are a comprehensive university. So, we're not a specialized university that just does three things. We should offer a range of programs to cover all the interests of the region. So the way we've handled this is, instead of having separate degrees, we're proposing to have fewer degrees that combine areas, like a degree in performing and in visual arts, that lets students have that music and art that they love, but puts it in a package that's a little bit more affordable for the institution. Instead of having separate history and English degrees, my own English major was part of the cuts, to say, well, we have this combination humanities degree with social science, and you can still do all the things that those degrees lead to. We're just trying to do it with fewer faculty, lower overhead, and thus less tuition spent, and more of our limited funds being put right back into the student experience.
So it sounds like, especially in those cases, you're not so much cutting programs as you're just kind of mushing some together. You have an English degree, so I'm sure the use of the word mushing is right in your wheelhouse. But just kind of squishing it all together to make it a little bit more streamlined. Would that be a good way to put it, you think?
Yes, sir. I mean, we took 21 majors, all of which were struggling in terms of their degree productivity, and I don't mind smushed. We put them into 4 degrees. We consolidated them because that's a sustainable model that requires fewer faculty. And with those liberal arts degrees, what we're also trying to do is say, look, it's the 21st century. A certain amount of flexibility is important. And so we're trying to make a virtue of this by saying, by designing new degrees that reflect what we're doing now, we're trying to preserve what's great about the liberal arts. And I'll give you an example. I'm quite excited about our new digital media degree, because in the old days, you sort of had these different fragments, English and communication and film, maybe even some computer science, all sort of working around the industry that is now very central. You know, we're on the internet right now, you're broadcasting this, so a degree in digital media is got a lot more workforce application than some of the degrees that we're folding up. And so what we're trying to do is protect the students. And in our case, of course, we also have students that come from socioeconomic backgrounds where taking on that student debt, even though our tuition is low, taking on any kind of debt really has to be connected with a vocational outcome that will help them and their family in the future. So we're trying to take seriously our charge to be very careful. This is not my money. This is the student money and the state's money, and we have to be very careful about how we spend it.
Boy, did you put your finger right on the topic and the issue, because we have seen this unfold over the last decade where a lot of the liberal arts degrees haven't seemed to give students and graduates the economic opportunities that they probably thought they might get. And that has been a bone of contention, a building bone of contention for a while, but it sounds like you recognize that and you're trying to address it.
Well, I recognize it in a pretty pragmatic way. I'll go ahead and say that a student with a social science or humanities and arts degree can do anything, and the earning power of any bachelor's degree is measurable. But the challenge is that takes risk, and the students have voted with their feet. I mean, to be honest, I would have happily maintained some of these degrees if they had 40, 50, 60, 70 students in them. But when you have a degree with 9 people in it, and you've got to maintain, 6 or 8 faculty to service that degree, you have to think about the economics of that. And I do think it's a little unfortunate that in the 21st century, students can't risk what I did, taking an English major. I had no idea what my job was going to be. I figured it would all work out, and it did for me. But that was a different time, and that was a different economy. So I think now students are very cautious about anything that doesn't have a direct job at the end, and that means that fewer of them will major in some of the things that were popular a generation ago. So it's a decision based on the data that we're seeing these days and the trends we see in student choices.
Well, and I was very happy right at the beginning of this when one of the examples you gave was performing arts and the various arts and music and things like that. Those have really lost focus in this tidal wave strength push to focus on things that lead directly to an identifiable job. Oh, if I get this degree, I do this. And I think that hurts us as a race, the human race. I think we need that. We have to have some of that, or we're in trouble. That's my opinion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that our lives are enriched and our culture is preserved by disciplines like art and music and history and literature. But universities have a duty in those realms that also includes existing. So on a pragmatic level, when I look at what I have to do to keep this place viable, we have to think about ways to serve the students and still serve those disciplines. So for example, certainly shutting down a music major gets some headlines, but we are putting an enormous amount of attention to the Delta Music Institute, which is a world-class facility with great faculty. And it's a different way to approach music. It's not the traditional music major, but it's viable because it has an outcome where students learn how to record and engineer and distribute their own music. And so in some ways, being successful in a more contemporary music degree may have damaged our ability to deliver a more traditional music degree. But one of the things that we all learn is when we study culture and economics and history, that nothing ever stays still. And by staying still, I think we're risking the big picture, which is the university has got to basically only spend the money it has.
That unfortunately is a position we all find ourselves in right now, Doctor. Talking to Dr. Dan Ennis at Delta State University, the president, making some changes, and it sounds like they're properly motivated. We'll put it like that. Can you hang around through the break, Doctor?
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Fantastic. We'll continue talking to Dr. Ennis when we return in the Element Wealth Studios live on Middays. Keep it here. Music, the president of Delta State on the show with us. It's that kind of day. It's a Delta day here on SuperTalk, Mississippi. I know you know Steve, right, Doc?
Listen, I love hearing a little Steve Azar. He's a good friend of the university and a great alum for us.
He really is, and he's a great guy. Of course, you hear him here on SuperTalk every week as well. Talking to Dr. Daniel Ennis, the president of Delta State, putting some changes into place. What kind of feedback have you gotten on some of the decisions that you're making up there?
Well, I think in general, our media folks have been counting up responses and they're trending quite positive. I think one of the issues that Delta State has faced is folks know that the institution is smaller than it used to be. They know that the budget's been tighter and tighter and tighter. And I think there's generally been a sense of, all right, at least we're now talking about it openly, and that the restructure is intended to give Delta State a long-term future. That doesn't mean there haven't been folks who are individually disappointed with individual decisions, and I recognize that's part of the job. But I think there's been so much anxiety about what might happen that now it's open. This is it. This is the plan. This is how we're going to work this going forward. And, I've been very pleased, especially on social media, to see so many of our alumni rally around what we call the good old school. And say that they understand that it's a different school than it was maybe back in the 90s, and that it has to become a viable school going forward. So I've been pleased, and I got to say that it's been very helpful to me to know that people who have a long-term emotional commitment to Delta State care enough to know that sometimes you have to make a hard decision to take care of it.
Well, and that part is a double-edged sword, because the fact that they care so much makes them so supportive and makes them the bedrock of the university. But at the same time, when you start moving their cheese, oh, yeah, the emotions kick in there too. So it kind of goes both ways there. And that's a very long-winded way of saying I really don't envy you in your seat right now, but it sounds like you're making some good decisions and moving forward in the best way possible right now. Do you foresee any additional changes coming down the road in the future?
Well, the university is always going to change, but one of my aims was, frankly, to pull the Band-Aid off. What I didn't want is a 5-year slow roll of now this is being cut, now this is being shut down. I kind of looked at the big picture and sat down with my financial folks and sat down with enrollment projections and revenue projections and said, all right, what do we have to do so next year we have a normal budget? And a normal budget to me is you don't spend more than you have, you don't do mid-year cuts, you don't cancel things in the middle of the process. So there will be always, any good institution, no matter what it is, does, course adjustments as they get information. But the big, most devastating emotionally hit, the biggest change I did all at once in one big fell swoop, because I didn't think that it was good for the university to sort of, just bleed and struggle year after year. I just wanted to say, with this, we're now in a place that we can live within our means. And so I think the shock for some of our alum was they'd not seen much, and then suddenly they saw this big set of decisions. 15-page memo and covering many, many areas of the university is a lot to digest, but I didn't think it was in anybody's interest to sort of do it incrementally.
Well, I think you used the right term, rip the Band-Aid off. That's the best way to get it off. It's going to hurt either way. Why drag it out?
Mm-hmm. Well,
so
I
think that's exactly right.
Where, for us, for enrollment, we want to get essentially all of it out there so students can make intelligent enrollment decisions. It's for transparency. We want a student to know, hey, this program is not going to be here. And of course, we want to pivot and say, however, these other programs are here. And if you're interested in Delta State, we have other options for you. And to do that, I thought we should just get it on out there and get it all done.
Now, this is going to sound like a bizarre question to ask in this situation, considering the context of the conversation, but any plans looking down the road for adding any new types of programs?
Sure. The four programs that we're excited about is a really contemporary and becoming increasingly popular way to train teachers. You know, for years, Delta State, and still to this day, has an extraordinary reputation as a sort of mecca for teacher training. And what we did is we redesigned the way we do secondary ed, and we proposed to the faculty, if we do it this way, we can continue to produce music teachers and English teachers and history teachers and math teachers for our community and for the whole state of Mississippi. And I'm delighted by that degree, because as I visit high schools and middle schools around Mississippi, I was at five high schools just 2 days, I guess, on Thursday. I always run into Delta State alums. And one of our best contributions to Mississippi is to make sure that there are great teachers spread out all over this wonderful state. So that's a new degree, and it picks up our duty to continue to train students. And it also means we can say to a student, well, we don't have a separate major in this, but you can still become a high school teacher in this. And we're preserving enough of the curriculum to give you the training you need. And it's the same licensure as any other teacher. It's an exciting thing for us. I've already mentioned some of the other new degrees. And then I think going forward, what we'll do is, we'll see where the students go. One of the approaches I take is you have to go to where the students are going. You have to talk to students about what they're interested in doing. And that unfortunately means that what they were interested in 10, 15, 20 years ago is not where they're going forward. So when you see a concentration of students taking a particular minor or asking for a particular course, you can say, all right, there might be a new degree there. Let's do some market research. And before we commit the resources, let's make sure we actually have a base for this to be successful. And that's how I've approached curriculum my whole career. And it works. It takes a little while because you have to study the student behavior and ask them questions. And that's a lot harder than just sort of spitting out a degree and hoping it works. But I think it's the right way for Delta State.
You're describing the laws of motion, and, we've heard them since elementary school. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. Delta State, in a lot of ways, and you're talking about ripping the Band-Aid off, in some ways, Delta State has been an object at rest for a little while. You had some programs there that were there because they were there. Now you're streamlining things, which I would think would free you up and give you the mobility to start moving in other areas that will have a bigger payoff for the students. And once you're in motion, it's so much easier to pick up speed and change direction.
Exactly. I think one of the challenges of a rather static list of programs is you have to service them all and you have to resource them all. And what you notice when you do that too long is viable, growing, vibrant and aggressive programs that are picking up students don't get the resources they need to continue to grow, because you spend so much of your payroll keeping a baseline, a sort of minimal support for too many programs means you can't really invest in the programs that are going strong. And so one of the things I'm excited about is, for years, I think the administration, because of enrollment problems and budget problems, has said no. To make some space to say yes, we've got to move our resources in a different direction. And I don't deny that certainly is upsetting for folks who are not part of those programs that demand reinvestment. But again, you have to go to where the students are and not wish that the students would be somewhere else.
Well, that's been a long-standing problem in a lot of areas of society. No, I said over here. Over here. That's nice, but over here, no. That only goes so far, especially when you get up to college age. They are deciding what to do with their life, and it doesn't have to be what you think it should be. They have to have those opportunities presented to them and let them pick. Let them choose what their best path is. And it sounds like you're making some changes to make that a lot easier. At Delta, it wasn't that hard to begin with, to be honest. It's Delta State, for crying out loud. But it seems like you're making it even better moving forward from here, and I think that's going to pay off. Now, of course, I'm an expert opinion on education, as you can tell, but from my layman's seat sitting over here, it looks like you're making some good moves based on some sound thinking. I'm just going to climb out on a limb. Sometimes that's rare in the world today. When you were running down the list of things that you do, basing it, your idea of a success is don't spend more than you bring in and all these other things. And I'm like, okay, so he's never going to run for office. I can tell that right now because that's how all of that works, right? Personally, again, I think you're doing a great job from what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, Doc.
Well, I tell you, since you brought up politics, I'll say this. One of the things that we have to do is send a message to the political culture in Mississippi that we're running our business. We're efficient and we're good stewards of other people's money. So that in the larger sense, Mississippi and our alums and future students will see Delta State as a place that is a good investment for their time and their money. And that's what we're excited about moving forward.
Dr. Daniel Ennis, president of Delta State University, making some changes and making some progress all at the same time. Those two do tend to go together at times. Doc, keep up the good work. Keep us updated on how it's going, okay?
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Have a lovely day.